In programming language, what are the two things we want to remember? That is nothing but the data as well as algorithm. Procedural programming does not have any proper way for hiding data. In the structural programming, we are going to focus on the branching. Hi, hello, namaste. A warm welcome to my new session on object-oriented programming. I'm Revati, faculty, Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. Before going to start today's session, let me to talk something general. Now, tell me how the peoples are going to communicate. Here, peoples are going to communicate each other through some communication language. It may be Kannada, English or Hindi. If I consider computer systems are dummy machine, then who is responsible for feeding the instruction to the computer system? That is nothing but the human beings. And all the instructions are represented or written in the form of programming language. That means all the instructions are fed into the computer system by using programming language. That means instructions are written by using programming language. Then what is instruction here? Consider the example that you people are the student, and before going to enter into the classroom, what you want to follow? First, you want to assemble. Then, after assembling, what you're going to do? You're going to sing the national anthem. Before that, who is going to give the instruction or command to sing the national anthem? That is none other than the commander or the captain. Think that you are the student and you're going to enter into the classroom. Now, what are the instructions the student want to follow? That is, before entering into the classroom, he must assemble in the auditorium or in the ground. After that, what they want to do? They want to sing the national anthem. After that, what is the instruction the student want to follow? That is, they want to return one by one into the classroom. So, this is nothing but the flow of the program. So, this is itself called instruction. That means the step by step, the execution of the program. That is nothing but the instruction. Similarly, the computers are capable to understand only the instruction. So, the instructions are written by using programming language. It may be any programming language like C, C++, Java or any other programming language. So dear student, just remember that in today's session, we are going to discuss object-oriented programming. So the actual programming starts from your chapter number 6. That means in our first PUC computer science, we are going to have programming language. And which kind of programming language we are going to use here? That is nothing but C++. In my today's session, at the beginning, I'll be discussing introduction. Then I'll be discussing about the 3 different types of programming. That is nothing but procedural programming, structural programming and object-oriented programming. So these are the 3 different types of programming we were discussing in my today's session. So dear students, instead of wasting much of time, directly moving on to the topic called introduction. So in programming language, what are the two things we want to remember? That is nothing but the data as well as algorithm. So dear student, as we know that the computer systems are capable to understand only the instruction, and how we are going to feed the instruction through the programming language. That means the instructions are formed through the programming language, and when it comes to the programming language, we are going to have data as well as algorithm. Then what is data? So here data is nothing but the unprocessed item, or it is nothing but the raw fact. So what is data? Here data is nothing but the raw fact or unprocessed item. For example, consider that I'm going to write the name, that is college name equal to Vidhyaashram. So what is Vidhyaashram here? Here Vidhyaashram is nothing but the data. And if I write the establishment year, that is 2010, then what it is? Once again, it is nothing but the data. So here data is nothing but the raw fact or unprocessed item. Now tell me some of the example for data. So here some of the example for data may be a text or a number or a video file or audio or image. These are the example for data. So dear student, just you want to remember that data is nothing but the raw fact or unprocessed data. That means before going to execute whatever the item or information I'm going to have, that is treated as data. And the example for data is text, number or image, audio or video. These are the example for data. What is algorithm then? So here algorithm is nothing but the solving problem step by step into the finite number of steps. So I'm going to use the number finite number of steps. So what is finite number of steps? I know that when and how many numbers of steps I require. That is itself called finite number of steps. Now consider the example that you're going to have the driverless car. So what you're going to have? That is nothing but driverless car. Then how the instructions are written here? Just remember that when the passenger near to the car, what's going to happen? The car door must open. Once the car door is open, what the passenger want to do? The passenger want to get into the car. Once the passenger is get into the car, what's going to happen? The car door must be closed. After closing the car door, what's the next step? That is turn on the engine. Then start moving the car. Then change the gear. So this is the step by step instruction. That means these are the way used to solve the problem, and these are the finite number of steps. So what is algorithm here? Here algorithm is nothing but the solving the problem step by step into the finite number of steps. That is itself called algorithm. So here data is the main substance of the program. So the data as well as the algorithm are the main pillar or the main component of the programming language. And the object-oriented programming language is mainly designed based on the principles of modular approach. So what is modular approach here? That is nothing but the complex problems are divided into smaller tasks. After finding the solution to the smaller subtask, we are going to club those smaller tasks in order to find the solution for the complex task. So this is itself called modular approach. That means dividing the larger complex problem into smaller tasks or smaller module. So what are the things you need to remember here? That is nothing but the data as well as algorithm along with the modular approach. So if I consider any programming language, what is the pillar? That is nothing but the data as well as algorithm. Moving further, I'm going to have three different types of programming language. That is nothing but the procedure programming language, structural programming language, and object-oriented programming language. So how many types of programming language I'm going to have? That is nothing but the three. So what are the three types of programming language I'm going to have? That is procedural programming. So dear student, just remember that it's not procedural oriented programming language. It is just procedural programming language. Then I'm going to have structural programming language. Along with that, I'm going to have object-oriented programming language. If I consider procedural programming, then what is procedural programming? So these are the early programming. And in the procedural programming, we are going to mainly focus on the instruction. So the procedural programming focus on the processing of instruction. So what is processing of instruction? That is nothing but the execution of instruction. That means after the completion of one instruction, execute the another instruction. So it is nothing but the finite number of instruction. Here we are going to focus only the execution of the instruction in order to perform certain or desired computation. Then here I can able to use the algorithm. That means the procedural programmings are nothing but the algorithm. In algorithm, what we have? We are going to have the finite number of steps. That means we are going to solve the particular problem in finite number of steps. Whereas in the procedural programming, we are going to focus on the processing of instruction. So, therefore, highlight more on doing the things like algorithm. That means it's mainly going to focus on the algorithm. So, this kind of programming is very lengthy and very complex. That means whatever the procedural programming we are going to have, that is very lengthy. Along with that, it is complex. And what is the example I can able to specify here? That is nothing but the Pascal and the C program. So here C is also one kind of programming language like C++. That means the basics for C++ programming language, I can tell that it is C program. So what are the things you need to remember here? That is, in the procedural programming, we are going to focus on the processing of the execution. That means it's mainly going to focus on the execution of instruction. That means execute the instruction one after another. That is nothing but the algorithm. Then what's the disadvantage I'm going to have? That is nothing but the procedural programming languages are lengthy and it is complex. Then What is the disadvantage of procedural programming? That is nothing but the lengthy as well as complex. Then what is the example for procedural programming? That is nothing but C as well as Pascal. Now consider the example here. Think that I'm going to have the large program or complex problem. Now what I will do, I'm going to break those complex problem into smaller subgroup. So here I'm going to have the main program and I'm going to have the procedure. So here subprograms are treated as procedure. That means I'm going to break the complex problem into smaller problem. That is nothing but the smaller task. Here task is nothing but the procedures. So procedure 1, procedure 2 and procedure 3. So if I divide the problem like this, it becomes more complex as well as it is lengthy procedure. And the procedural programming language uses top-down approach. So what is top-down approach here? That means the execution of the program is going to start at the main program. So find the solution for this main program, then find the solution for the sub-program. So this is the way the procedural programming is going to work. That means whatever the program or whatever the problem you're going to have, that is divided into smaller sub tasks. Then what are the key points you want to remember? Here is at the beginning, the procedural programming, the programs are divided into smaller function. So here function is nothing but the procedures. So dear student, while remembering this topic, first remember that you're going to have the complex problem. Now what you're going to do, you're going to subdivide that complex problem into smaller subtasks. So here subtask is nothing but the function or procedure. Now just consider the example that all are familiar with the basic calculator. Agree, right? In the basic calculator, what are the options I'm going to get? That is nothing but the addition operation, subtraction, division and multiplication. So think that you're going to build a basic calculator with the options like addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. If I start writing code for this problem, then it is very complex and it is very lengthy. So what I will do, I'm going to divide this problem into smaller sub-problem. That means at the beginning, I'm going to have one main program. Under that, I'm going to have the 4 subprogram. So here subprogram is nothing but the function. What are the function I'm going to have? That is add function, subtract function, multiplication function, then division function. So what I will do, I'm going to write the code for individual functions separately. Later I'm going to club. That means the actual execution of this problem is going to start from the main program. So this is the way you can able to subdivide your complex problem or complex task. Now the procedural programming follows top-down approach. That means the execution of the program starts from the main program. So it's going to use the top-down approach and there is no access specifier. That means if I want to access any data or function, then I does not require any access specifier in the procedural programming. Then I'm going to have procedural programming does not have any proper way for hiding data. That means the procedural programming language is less secure. That means it does not support the concept called data hiding. That means all the user can able to access the data and it is less secure. Then procedural programming function is more important than data. That means in the procedural oriented programming language, we are going to give more importance to the procedure or functions rather than data. That means we are not going to give more importance to the data. And the example here is I'm going to have C or Fortran or Pascal or Basic, etc. So dear student, what are the things we want to remember? That is, it is mainly going to focus on functions rather than the data. And here the complex problems are divided into smaller tasks, that is nothing but the function. Then I'm going to have the another type of programming, that is nothing but the structural programming. So what is structural programming here? In the structural programming, we are going to focus on the branching. So what you want to remember here? Here we are going to focus on the branching. Then what kind of branching? That is nothing but the if or if else, or I'm going to have while. So which limits the branching of small set. So in structural programming language, we are going to focus on the branching. Then what kind of branching? It is if or if else, or it may be while. Anyway, dear student, in my upcoming session, we are going to study in depth about what is branching and how the branching is going to take place. So here the idea is, it is nothing but the top down. That means the structural programming approach, it follows top down approach. That means the large programs are divided into smaller tasks. To illustrate the structural programming, once again I can able to consider the same example. That is, I want to design the basic calculator with the basic operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. Now what I will do, instead of writing whole program together, I'm going to break those program or problem into smaller sub problem, and I'm going to find the solution for smaller sub problem. Later I'm going to club the sub programs in order to get my final solution. So the actual execution is going to start from the main program, that is from the top module. So here the structural programming is going to use top-down design, and the large problems are broken into smaller sub-programs. So dear student, how to remember the concept here? That is, the structural programming is mainly going to focus on the branching. And if I'm going to encounter the word branching, what are the things I want to remember? That is if else and while. Anyway, we are going to study what is if else, what is while, everything in my upcoming sessions. Then it's mainly based on the top-down approach. And what is the drawback here? The major drawback is that it's very difficult to model the real-time problem. That means by using structural programming, we cannot able to model the real-time problems. That is the main disadvantage of structural programming. So what is the drawback of structural programming? That is nothing but we cannot able to model the real-time problem. That means we cannot able to find the solution for real-time problem. So this is the main disadvantage of structural programming. For that reason, we are going to have another type of programming language, that is nothing but the object-oriented programming. Before that, let me to tell you how to remember the points of structural programming. That is, it is a subset of procedural programming. So in the procedural programming, we are going to have the problem, then we are going to subdivide the complex problem. So same way in the structural programming, we are going to follow. That means we are going to have the complex problem. Whatever the complex problem we are going to have, we are going to subdivide that one into smaller group, and once again it is going to follow top-down approach. So here programs are divided into smaller programs or functions, and the main aim is to improve and increase the quality, clarity and development. That means why I required structural programming here, in order to improve the quality as well as clarity of the programming and development time of computer program. It is simple and it is mainly going to focus on functions and process. That means in the structural programming language, we are going to focus on the functions as well as process. So what is process? That is nothing but the execution part. These methods are written globally. That means in the structural programming, we are going to have the global access specifier. That means the methods are written globally and it can be accessed globally. So what is globally here? That is throughout the program. So all the methods or functions or procedures inside the programs are written globally, and it usually follows top-down approach. That means the execution of the program is always going to start from the main program. Then in order to overcome the disadvantage of structural programming, I'm going to have the object-oriented programming. So what is object here? The real-time problems are represented by using objects-oriented programming. So what is object here? The real world entities are represented as object, and the real world problems are very easily solved with the help of object-oriented programming. So the object-oriented programming, that is nothing but the OOPS, is a concept that combines both data and functions. That means suppose if we want to combine or club data as well as functions together, then you're going to have the concept called object-oriented programming. That means I'm going to have one bag, that is carry bag. Inside that I'm going to have data and function. And what is my carry bag here? Here carry bag is nothing but the class. So I'm going to have the class. For class I'm going to have the data as well as function. So the object oriented programming is mainly used to combine data and functions together, that operates on that data into a single unit called object. So the single unit is called object. So what is object? Here objects are used to represent real entity, that is real world entity. So object is an identifiable entity. So objects are also called entity or instance of the class, with some characteristics and behavior. That means here objects are nothing but the replication of class. So what is class? Here class holds data as well as functions. So the objects are nothing but the replications of class. So the OOPS follows bottom up approach. That means the actual execution of the program starts from the bottom. That means in the object oriented programming we are going to write the subprograms at the beginning, then at the end we are going to write the main program, and the actual execution of the program starts at the bottom. So the object oriented programming is mainly used to combine or club data as well as functions. So this is the example used to illustrate how the objects are clubbed. So the object includes data as well as function. That is nothing but the class is a template that represents a group of objects which share common properties and relationship. So these are the objects and they are going to share the common properties. So what is common property here? That is data and function. If I consider object A, what are the things it's going to have? That is data as well as function. If I consider object C, once again it is going to have function and data. If I consider object B, what I'm going to have? That is once again I'm going to have data and function. So here class is a template. So what is class here? Class is nothing but the template and it is used to represent group of objects. So how many group of object I'm going to have? That is 3 group of object and which is going to share common properties as well as relations. So objects are nothing but the replication of class, or class is nothing but the replication of object. So in general, objects are replication or replica of the class and it's going to share the common property as well as relationship. Then how to remember the concept here? That is the object oriented programming. Here programs are divided into smaller parts called object. So dear student, just remember that in the previous 2 programming type, the complex problems are divided into smaller function or procedure. But whereas in object oriented programming, the complex problems are represented or divided into smaller part and it is called object. So here the object oriented programming uses bottom up approach. That means at the beginning I'm going to have the smaller task and I'm going to have the main task. So that is nothing but the main program and the execution of the program is going to start from the main program. Now object oriented programming have access specifier like public, private and protected. That means suppose if I use the object oriented programming, then I'm going to have the access specifiers like public, private and protected. Then adding new data and function is very easy. That means in object oriented programming we are going to have separate object as well as classes, and adding new data or member function is very easy. Then object oriented programming provides data hiding. That means you can able to hide, that is data abstraction. Whatever the data you want to hide from the user, you can achieve by using object-oriented programming language so that your programming is more secure. The object-oriented programming is based on the real world. So whatever the real world problems you're going to have, that is represented with the help of object-oriented programming. That means this programming concept was mainly designed to solve the real world problems. The best example here is Java, C++, Python and C#. Dear students, from the examination point of view, these are the topics are very important. This is all about today's session. Let's meet in the next session with some more information about object-oriented programming. Until then, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.